Hey guys, this is Kara Martens, and I wanted to just take a couple minutes to kind of share with you some thoughts that I've been having over the last probably year, but it's really ramped up in the last couple months as I've talked to other kids pastors like me, kidmin leaders, lead volunteers that are in charge of a ministry, and I've seen what's posted online. And so I wanted to talk specifically today about how I think that we're making a mistake in the models that we're kind of trying to mimic. And I think there's a different way, a better way, one that I've been using the last couple months. And so I just wanted to get us thinking a little bit about kind of some of the common models that I see, and then kind of an uncommon response that I'm hoping would leave you encouraged, that even though right now feels really discouraging, it feels like we're in this really unique time in kids ministry, that I think that you have everything that you need to be successful, and to help encourage kids and to create a better experience for everyone on Sundays, kids, volunteers, you. And so if you just would follow along with me for a couple minutes and see if any of this kind of resonates with you. So maybe you thought before, you've looked at a bigger church in town or something you see online and you think, hey, if only I had a bigger stage or better lighting or a better set or better equipment, then things would be better. Or maybe you thought, I hear this one a lot right now, if only I had more teachers. I need more teachers. I need more people to step up and lead. Or maybe you've thought, I really need more kids. The parents, the families, they haven't come back. And so, or maybe they're not coming back as often. And so attendance is very sporadic. I think we've all been feeling that tension a lot. And so a little while ago, I've been consulting for a while. I work at a small to medium sized church, an average sized church in Texas. And then I've also consulted and I've worked with curriculum companies and leadership development. I've been a teacher. I kind of like yo-yo between the education world and the church world, because I think there's a lot of things that they have in common. And so I just want you to know that all of this kind of comes from a place of, I'm currently like you. I'm trying to figure this out in a church. And I think it can be done, but I think we've got to maybe stop looking around or trying to keep doing things the way we always have, because I don't know about you, but it hasn't been working. So let's talk at first about kind of what I see probably in a lot of the bigger size churches that I think makes some of us kind of envious, or I've seen this with churches that are growing quickly, that maybe go create a new building. And so I kind of think of this as like the large group kind of church model. Can you guys see yeah, there we go. So I would kind of like think of this sort of like a mini church kind of version, where we're treating kids kind of like they're mini adults. And so we've got, a leader, and maybe even if you're really lucky, a great worship person, or maybe that's the same person. And then we've got lots of kids, like kids everywhere. Right? And so they all kind of get dropped off into one big room. We attended a church like this a couple of years ago with my kids, and my son was in K to first at the time. And so we would drop him off kind of into this big room. They would start with kind of like fun activities that were kind of on the sides and kind of all around. And then for the most of the time, they would all kind of sit in the middle. And there was this stage, and it was really well done. There would be a speaker and a skit and worship, and then after that was all done, and there might be a prayer, and then they'd go back to kind of playing on the sides until parents came to pick up, right? So I kind of think of this as like, the large church, big box kind of model. And so around me, like I said, a lot of kind of the newer churches or churches that created new buildings, this is the model they went to. And let's talk about the pros and cons of this. You can fit a bunch of kids in there, especially if you're growing quickly with less volunteers needed. Con is really, truly, you need a really good leader. You need great video curriculum. You need great worship to really engage this many kids. And so I was praying about this recently. I was trying to come up with a good analogy. And I feel like the analogy God gave me, see if I can find my blue marker, was like the splash zone. And this was like huge in my mind. And so if we're thinking about the splash zone, there's a lot of pressure on this leader. And whatever is going to happen on this stage to be able to reach these kids. And so, like when you go to SeaWorld or something like that, or you're on a certain ride and they say, hey, the people in these front rows, they're in the danger zone, they're in the splash zone. And so I think in a large church, you just have to have really talented, skilled people that are constantly working to get better. Otherwise, the splash zone, the kids that are going to get hit is only a certain percentage of this big crowd. And I think really more than ever, kids, their attention span is shorter. And we'll talk about that in a different webinar, but their attention span is shorter. So it really takes some great people. And I think, I don't know about you, but I've been at this small to medium-sized church for 2 years. I still haven't found, I do this, but I still haven't found leaders to help me do this. And so that's kind of a con of that, is that you really need someone pretty well. Because let's be honest, kids with video games and things like that, like they have a high production value of what they're used to and what they consider good, right? Compared to what it used to be. So this is the first model that I see a lot of. The next one that I think is almost as common, especially in our older churches or small to medium-sized churches, would be more like the classroom model. And I think of this like age grade. You divided them by age or grade. And so you have kind of one phase of life kind of in this smaller room, right? And so if we're kind of doing the same type thing, we've got the teacher right here, and then we've got, 20 to 24 kids, let's say, kind of in the classroom, right? That's kind of the classroom model mindset, okay? And so then if we're going to our splash zone, I think probably before COVID, or even a couple of years before that, things have been we've seen some cracks kind of in the teaching world. How your teacher friends, if you have teacher friends, are feeling right now. Like the needs have never been greater and they've never felt stretched so thin. Like, does that sound familiar? Like we're kind of in the same boat with them on that. And so if they have a classroom of 20 to 24, they might feel like kind of on any given day, through different things that they do, they might feel like they could reach half, maybe 3/4. Okay. And so recently, last spring, I was actually in one of our classrooms kind of here, and we would say that we do kind of a small group model. But when I first came back to work at a church, one of the things that I had in my head was, what makes this work right here is that these people are trained, right? They're professionals. And so like, if you think of those commercials or even at SeaWorld or whatever, they're like, don't try this at home. Like these people are professionals. Like I went to school. I've since gotten multiple certifications. I've continued to do professional development and learning on my own. And I will tell you that last spring, kind of before I had some major motivation to make some changes quick, I was in one of our rooms, and I would have told you like, hey, if a trained teacher can do 24, then a volunteer should always do half of that. Even if you think, hey, I'm providing training or whatever, a volunteer should do half. And so when I first started here, I would think like 12 kids, kind of per a leader with kind of a helper. And last year I was in a room several weeks in a row because just like you, I was short volunteers. I know that you know that feeling. I just didn't have enough people. So I was actually in a room, which I try really hard not to do. Because once people see you in a room, it's kind of hard for them to picture you out of it. They think, oh, she's got it. And so I had 12 kids in there, and I promise it felt like 24. I had kids upside down on the couch, rolling up in rugs, trying to engage them using all the tricks in my toolbox was a very big load. And so that led me to actually believe that, hey, in this new reality, 6 kids is really our goal for volunteers in the church, of how many kids they're working with at a time for them to be successful. So just kind of keep that number in mind as like we kind of keep talking. And so where this really kind of came home to me on a personal level was, like I said, a couple of years ago, we were actually attending a church with this model kind of for kids ministry. And I have a young guy that back then was in kindergarten to first grade. And he started having trouble in school in kind of this traditional classroom sign up. And that led to some testing and a bunch of other things. And he was starting to feel very bad about himself. And one day when I was taking him to church, and he would go in willingly, because again, this was really well done. And I have no doubt he was worshiping Jesus and he was hearing Jesus, but I realized that nobody knew his name. Nobody in this model knew his name, knew anything really about him. And so here he was struggling so hard in school and he wasn't known at church. And he felt bad about himself and I didn't have an answer. And so I decided right then and there that I needed to get with a church that had a little bit more of a personal kind of mindset all the way down to kids, not just for adults, not just for teens. And so I actually got an opportunity to come to the church that I'm at right now. And it was a wonderful opportunity, like I said, especially for my family. It was really good timing. And so I'm going to try to like turn my computer here a little bit. And I kind of, walked in like we all do. And I kind of went back to what I knew best. And so the models that I had used kind of in the past that had worked for me pretty well was I had kind of an age grade. So our first service, back then we had two. Our first service, I kind of had teachers that I could kind of recruit that a certain age group went in. I made sure I had 2 to 3 leaders so they could, kind of at least get smaller circles within there. And so that's what we did first service. And I had almost all weekly and every other week before COVID. And then for our second hour, because we had repeat kids, I know you know what that is like. We used kind of this other model that I know you guys are probably familiar with, kind of you've seen before too. So our second service, we did what I would kind of consider like a VBS, like a rotational model, because our numbers really fluctuated. I was having trouble getting volunteers. I had some teenagers. So I really wanted to set them up for a win. And so how this looked for us was I actually recruited, I'm not sure how to make my picture here. If these are kind of 3 classrooms in a row, I recruited a teacher, a teacher, a teacher. And then I had a teenager, I'll do a little T, a teenager, and they would actually take their group of kids up to 12, because this is pre-COVID. So, that magic number 12, pre-COVID. And really now between 2 of them, an adult leader and a teenager, really, we've still got more of the 6 mind model, right? And so they would start out in one room, and after so many minutes, they rotate to the next one, and then they rotate to the next one. And then we had kind of our worship time with a video, things like that. This actually was pretty good. This model worked pretty well. But for, the pros of it were behavior was pretty good because they were actually moving. It was limited. So even if they didn't completely love what was happening in a station, they knew they wouldn't be in there for very long. That built-in movement helped a lot. They were still forming relationships with both the teenager and the person. This person liked it because they repeated themselves kind of multiple times. So they really got in the swing of it by the second or the third. And so I would say this model worked pretty well. The drawbacks of this one was probably just the pacing, because it still was really hard to work out the timing, because like this activity went longer than this one, or these kids went through it faster and it would back up, and you know what happens when there's unstructured time and nothing to do. And so this model was pretty close. But in COVID land, right, last year, I don't know about you, but a lot of these solutions no longer worked because the large group, the big box mentality, really, if you're trying to keep numbers low, keep kids separated. And that's why a lot of our larger churches, didn't do kids ministry. They went to a screen. And so they would talk to people kind of through the screen. And we know how hard that is to really connect through a screen. But, I know how hard people were just trying to keep those relationships going. And then most of us had to go back more to this kind of classroom model where we could kind of, put set groups of kids in so that we knew if germs and things like that for reporting. And we really couldn't rotate or share supplies or do any of all that because none of that was really encouraged, was it? And so after a couple months of this, I had one of my great, amazing volunteers. There were only a couple of us left because I know that you know this too. It was like, the great divide. So when we opened back up, a lot of our leaders didn't feel comfortable coming back for lots of different readers, like these big T, these teachers, these leaders that I had recruited to be weekly and every other week. that had huge get it factor and great hearts. Some of them had health concerns. Some of them had people at their homes that they were worried about. Some of them just realized they were tired, and after taking a break, they wanted to take a longer break, and they deserved it. They had been doing it a long time. There were a lot of reasons why people weren't coming back, but I was left with very few volunteers. And inside this classroom, because this is the model that we were left, it was pretty crazy. The energy levels were kind of extremes. In some cases, we had a bunch of kids that were practically climbing the walls. And so if we tried to do kind of a more fun activity, we were literally feeling like we were peeling them off the walls. And if there was 6 of them, they felt like 12. Just because of kind of the behavior and the challenges. And so even our veteran teachers with a lot of tools and a lot of tricks were coming out just like, I don't know, so I was like, oh no, there's only a couple of us left. And then on the other extreme, we had so few kids sometimes that would show up, that the participation, that energy, what it feels like when it's just kind of dead, and kids just really aren't into it and they're withdrawn. It's the opposite extreme. And they're just kind of not into it. And so we were having that. And so the few leaders that were dealing with that, they were very discouraged. And so morale was pretty low. And so I realized like we needed another model, even though some of these work for certain reasons. I knew we needed a different model. And about that time I took my son that I was talking about, a new place near us called Kidzania opened up. And so I went with him to this place and it was amazing. But I sort of had an epiphany that he was dragging me all over that place. He didn't want to leave. Everything was set up so well. And he was in charge. He would walk up. They would have instructions right there, kind of an iPad. They had a person available if he needed help, just to kind of interact and engage with them. He had things that he had to complete to earn money. He could buy things with money. It was a genius model. And I just thought, that's what we need to do. That's what the church could do. That's what we could offer right now. There's a lot of things that we can't control, but we can control our environment, and we can create a setup and a system that's so exciting that kids, this is what God kind of gave me, that kids are dragging their parents to church because they don't want to miss out. And so that was kind of the phrase God gave me. And so I, over the last couple of months, kind of developed what I kind of call the quest model, kind of based on what I saw there, as well as drawing from things that work from all of these models. And so in my quest model, I'm going to turn this because here, let's go back to splash zone. I forgot, like right here with splash zone, you got pretty good coverage, kind of in here, but it's getting harder and harder to find these big T's, right? And so I realized I needed a different model. I needed to be able to recruit kind of different people. And so in my quest model, we had kids arriving and we had stations set up. We needed one big room, like a large classroom, right? We needed a larger classroom. And then I could either put a leader like here and one here. So I need limited leaders. But everything they needed to be successful, kind of like that Kidzania, was kind of, at the stations. And the environment was engaging, and I added gamification and a whole bunch of other things. And so the most, going back to this right here, the most that I would have had at any given station is 6. And so when we're talking about splash zone, every kid was covered. And relationship is really where I think right now the church has the advantage. We can't outproduce some of the things that are going on, but we can certainly make it inviting, and we can make it fun, and we can make it engaging, and we can get kids moving around, and we can get them in proximity with people that are further along that love Jesus. And this is kind of the model that I think that we really need to be moving to. And what's ironic about it is when I look online, I think a lot of us are kind of in what like we would call this like a one-room schoolhouse, right? It's kind of, we've got multi-age and we've got all these different abilities. And I've actually found that with the right setup and the right environment, that's a total win. It helps our non-readers. It helps me plug in guests. It helps me make leaders out of some of the, and it's also helped me recruit, because I actually in my model don't need big T. I need helpers. I need people that can own kind of a station and their main job is to engage with kids and point them back to God. And so they have been loving it. The energy has been insane. And so, coming from, last spring where I just thought, I don't know, where the energy was in such extremes and morale with the few volunteers I had was so low. I can tell you we've had a complete turnaround. So now we still only have one service, which, we all know makes it so challenging to get volunteers, but I've got volunteers asking to serve again. I've got a lot of teenagers plugged in very successfully as weekly people. While I've got other people rotating through, I've got other people that, are still, I have some of my amazing teachers are still back. And they love this new model because it just sets them up for a relational exchange, right? They're close and personal, and they're getting to know kids' names and how they're wired and how God made them. They're getting to encourage them and they're getting to have fun with them. And it's a total win. And so we went from 15 to 20 kids last spring to we've been averaging 35 to 45. We have about 220 per week adults and kind of teenagers in the worship. And we're running 20 to 25% of whatever. The national average is about 15% kids ministry to adults in the building. And so we're regularly running 25% or more. And kids are dragging their parents to church. And so I've kind of created a course. I'm going to create a couple more webinars. I want to spread the news that we don't have to give up. Like, this can actually be our moment, even if you don't have a large room or an incredible communicator. And I have been around some incredible communicators. Even if you don't have big T teachers anymore, which I'm going to talk about that in another webinar. I think that ship has sailed. I think we're going to need a new model. And that you've loved a VBS kind of camp feel. You knew that was successful, but how in the world do you pull that off every single week? I can show you. And so if you're interested, I'm looking for 5 to 10 people kind of to test, pilot, beta test my online course where I've put together what I did, how I did it, give you models, give you templates. And we kind of form a community. There'd be a weekly call. And I would also learn from you what works and what doesn't. And my main goal is that we would be able to do what all of us got in this for. At my lowest last year, I just thought, this isn't what I got in this for. Like, every week fill-in fatigue of just, oh my goodness, trying to have just enough people. And it just felt like I was never going to get out of it. And I was in it for the relationship with kids and to see them learn more about God, experience God, and get to know other kids and other adults, putting other adults in their life that knew Jesus and encouraging their parents of the value of all this. And I needed to be spending all my time and energy on that. And so I can honestly say that that's now what's happened, is I can put my energy back on all the reasons that I got into this in the first place. So if you want to know more, go ahead and drop me. You could private message me and I'll connect with you that way. You can drop a note kind of below this webinar, but please don't give up. It's too important not to try something new.